Hey, how you doing? This is a talking dude. Thank you for watching. And we're talking about the general election again, and we're going to talk about the Labour Party and how the Labour Party, not just them to be honest, but all the mainstream parties have got this thing about attacking the rich, attacking the super rich, saying that the rich are, you know, they're not paying their fair share of tax is one of the big things that they like to say. And all of the promises that are being made by the parties with regard to, be it energy prices, be it regard to house building, police numbers, the National Health Service, education, higher education, and so on. All of these things are being, they're all saying, yeah, we're going to give you this free stuff, hashtag free stuff for the pros, and it's all going to be paid for by taxing the very wealthy. So we can see on screen here, a few days ago, Jeremy Corbyn and McDonnell came out and said, yeah, we're going to raise tax on most people who are earning more than £80,000 a year. What I want to do in this video is to kind of debunk the idea that people who are earning over that amount, or people who are relatively wealthy in comparison to others in this country, are not paying their fair share of tax. They bloody are paying their fair. They're paying a lot more tax than they really would be if there was a proper level playing field, at least when it comes to tax. So let me break this down. First of all, some facts. You probably know this if you're in Britain. Well, you should know this if you're in Britain, but here are the brackets on income tax. So we've got income tax and we've also got national insurance. Everyone pays national insurance at the same percentage. I think it's around about 2% or thereabouts. That's a tax as well. And it's not going towards your pension or anything like that. It's just another tax. You know, we're being swindled in that regard. But then we have income tax. And here's how it works. Anything you earn up to £11,500 in a year, you don't pay any tax on. And I think that's a great thing. I think that threshold should actually go up, because I think it incentivizes people who are poor, at the poorest end, it incentivizes them to work, because they know that it's basically like working cash in hand. Everything that you get up to that certain amount of money is going to go straight into your pocket. Great way to incentivize work rather than having these benefits and whatnot, which as we know, I know from experience of people around me, disincentivizes you to work, because you basically, you know, it's pointless going into work because you'll get almost as much money from benefits. Anyway, the basic rate of tax is between £11,500 and £45,000, and you'll pay 20% of that amount of money you earn. In between those amounts, you will pay 20% of tax, 20% tax. So that's that. Most people are in that bracket. However, anything that you earn over £45,000 a year and under £150,000 a year, you'll pay 40% tax on that. And then anything that you earn over £150,000 a year, you pay 45% tax. Now, what this means is that those who are higher earners are already paying a lot more tax, a lot more of their income is going on taxes than people who are on lower rates of income are paying. And the results are actually quite staggering. First of all, remember that the personal allowance is up to £11,500. That means that under £11,500 you don't pay any tax. And obviously people who are unemployed, or if you're on, you know, maternity leave in some cases and so on, you're not paying any income tax at all. And guess what? According to recent statistics, 56% of UK adults are not paying any income tax at all. I'll repeat, more than half of adults in the UK are not paying any income tax at all. And that again is because of the personal allowance, that you don't pay any tax on that amount of money. Now, following on from that, remember we've got these higher brackets. So when you pay more of the money that you earn over £45,000 goes to the taxman, and then even more of that over £150,000 goes to the taxman. What's the result of that? Well, the result at the top end is that the top 1% of earners, the top 1% of taxpayers in the UK pay 27% of income tax that the UK government receives. And the top 10% of taxpayers pay 60 altogether. Between them, they pay 60% of the income tax that the UK government earns. So 2/3 of the income tax that the UK government actually earns, I say earns, they haven't earned it. 2/3 of the income tax that the UK government receives comes from 10%, 1 in 10 of income taxpayers. So what that is telling us is that the top 1% and the top 10% and the top 5% are already paying a hugely disproportionate chunk of the income tax that the UK government is receiving. To me, that sounds fair. That sounds more than fair. That sounds overly fair, to me. So the idea that the rich are not paying their fair share is nonsense. And just another quick note: sometimes you hear people claiming that the poorest people in this country pay a higher percentage of their income in tax than the richest people in this country, and they'll show you a graph like this based on income tax, but also on VAT and consumption taxes and so forth. They calculate that 37.8% of the poorest fifth's income goes on tax, whereas only 35% of the richest fifth's income goes on tax. But they're missing a very important point, and the very important point is that a large chunk of the income of the poorest people in this country comes from benefits and taxes. And if you take away the tax they paid from the money that they receive in benefits and tax credits and so on, you'll find that they actually are net recipients of money from the government, whereas the richest, they are net contributors to the government once you take away the small amount of their income which comes from benefits and so on. And that's laid out in this Institute for Fiscal Studies report, by the way, from 2010, called "Do the Poorest Really Pay the Most in Tax?" And then the other stat that I showed you about the income tax paid, it also comes from an IFS study from 2016. Now, the bottom line for me, the point I'm making in this is that, remember, 56% of UK adults don't pay any tax. What that means is that that these people who are going to vote in this election, they're being told by the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the Lib Dems, all of the parties actually, they're being told that, look, we'll give you stuff which you're not actually going to pay for. These people, this 56% of adults, are not paying any income tax whatsoever. So essentially, they're not really contributing much. Okay, they're consuming and so forth, and they're paying some taxes on fuel and these kinds of things, but a big chunk of their income is actually coming from benefits and tax credits and so forth. That's an issue that the country has to deal with. But think about how perverse it is that these people who are not paying any income tax are being kind of persuaded to vote for a particular political party who are going to take money from others who are earning, who are bringing in income, who are paying the majority of the income tax already, a huge majority of the income tax being paid by the top 10% of earners, and yet they're going to have their money, more of their money taken away from them, so that stuff can be given to other people who are not paying any income tax. That's a very perverse situation. And yeah, okay, you can say for the many, but not for the few. But to me, this just shows the sort of the problem with democracy, really, as it stands. Particularly in a situation where we have a welfare state, in a situation where we have a social democratic kind of system, you're always going to have this scenario where the productive members of society are going to be have more and more of their productivity and their wealth taken away to pass on to the less productive members of society. And it's a problem. Without these rich people, guys, just to end on this, without the super rich, without the top 1%, that you hate so much, without the top 5%, without the top 10%, there would be no money for all of these trinkets that you're being offered. There'll be no money for the National Health Service. There'll be no money for welfare, for benefits. There'll be no money for university tuition. There'll be no money for road building. There'll be no money for any of these things if it wasn't for those very wealthy people. So what we as a country need to be doing is stop demonizing these rich people and instead, encourage the wealthy, encourage the productive people who, for whatever reason, are wealthy, are productive, and there's lots of conversations we need to have about that. Let's encourage them to invest and to spend and to help to build up the country. And then let's also find out what are the best ways of getting those who are not as productive, those at the lower end of the economic scale, what's the best way of getting them to be productive and to be breaking those cycles of dependency which a lot of them are trapped in. I think that having a higher personal income threshold, before you pay tax. I think that'll be a good idea. But let's not try and trick them by bamboozling them to say that, we'll just take more and more money from the rich to pay for your stuff. Because as someone is alleged to have said once, and I'll close with this, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. Thanks for watching. This is a Talking Dude. I will see you soon.